Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked around his apartment. Pizza boxes were stacked on the coffee table like a tower about to fall over. Empty soda cans covered every surface, and his clothes were scattered everywhere like he'd been robbed by the world's laziest thief. He was only 28, but he felt ancient. Working as a computer programmer meant sitting at his desk for 12 hours straight, fixing code and meeting impossible deadlines. His boss always wanted things done yesterday, and his clients never seemed happy no matter how hard he worked. The apartment smelled like old food and desperation. Jake couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his kitchen counter. It was buried under takeout containers, dirty dishes, and mail he'd been meaning to open for weeks. His bedroom looked like a hurricane had hit a laundry store. His phone buzzed, with another video call from his mom. Jake almost ignored it, but he knew she'd keep calling until he answered. He quickly moved some garbage out of the camera's view and accepted the call. "Oh, honey, you look terrible," his mom said, her face scrunched with worry. "When's the last time you ate a real meal? And what's that smell?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with work." Jake tried to angle the phone so she couldn't see the disaster behind him. "You're not fine. You look like you haven't slept in days. And is that a sock hanging from your lamp?" Jake glanced over, and sure enough, there was indeed a sock draped over his reading lamp. He had no memory of how it got there. "Listen, I'll call you later. I have a big project due tomorrow." "You always have a big project due tomorrow. You need help, sweetheart. Real help." After hanging up, Jake slumped back in his chair. His mom was right. He needed help, but hiring a regular cleaning person cost way too much money. He'd already looked into it. The good ones charged more per hour than he made, and the cheap ones had reviews that scared him. He opened his laptop and started searching again. Most cleaning services wanted a monthly contract, background checks, and references. Some wanted him to be home during cleaning, which was impossible with his work schedule. Others had waiting lists longer than a popular restaurant. Just as he was about to give up, a new website popped up in his search results. Stellar Domestic Solutions had a sleek black and silver design that looked professional and modern. The tagline read, "Revolutionary cleaning technology. Results that are out of this world." Jake clicked through their gallery of before and after photos. The transformations were incredible. Messy apartments that looked worse than his became spotless havens that belonged in fancy magazines. The testimonials were amazing too. "Best investment I ever made. Their advanced system cleaned my place perfectly. I couldn't believe how efficient they were. It was like magic. Their technology is years ahead of everyone else, worth every penny." What caught Jake's attention most was the pricing. Instead of hourly rates that would bankrupt him, they offered flat-rate packages. A complete apartment deep clean for less than what other companies charged for a basic tidy-up. The website explained they used cutting-edge automated systems and proprietary cleaning technology. Jake figured they must have some kind of super advanced robot vacuums and cleaning machines. That would explain the low prices and high efficiency. He clicked on the booking form. It was surprisingly simple. Just basic information about him, his apartment size, and what kind of cleaning he needed. There was a section to upload photos of his space, which made him cringe. His apartment looked even worse in pictures. The form asked about his schedule and preferences. Jake selected evening appointments since he was usually still working during normal business hours. He also checked the box for deep cleaning because his place needed serious help. At the bottom of the form was a note. "Our specialized units are trained to handle even the most challenging domestic situations. No job too big or small. Satisfaction. Guaranteed or your money back." Jake hesitated for a moment. The whole thing seemed almost too good to be true. Advanced cleaning robots for bargain prices? But then he looked around his apartment again. A pile of laundry had somehow migrated from his bedroom to his kitchen. There was a coffee mug growing something green and fuzzy on his windowsill. He needed help, and he needed it fast. His current lifestyle wasn't sustainable. He was barely keeping his head above water at work, and his personal life had become a complete disaster. Something had to change. Jake filled in his credit card information and hit submit. The confirmation email arrived almost instantly, which impressed him. Most companies took forever to respond to anything. Thank you for choosing Stellar Domestic Solutions, the email read. Your specialized cleaning unit has been assigned and will arrive tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. sharp. Please ensure someone is available to provide access to the premises. Our advanced systems will handle the rest. For the first time in months, Jake felt a spark of hope. Maybe tomorrow he'd come home to a clean apartment. Maybe he could finally invite friends over without being embarrassed. Maybe he could even call his mom back and show her a tidy living space. He spent the rest of the evening doing something he hadn't done in ages. He actually threw away some of the worst garbage and cleared a path from his front door to his living room. If professional cleaners were coming, he should at least make it possible for them to get inside. That night, Jake fell asleep with a smile on his face. Tomorrow was going to be different. Tomorrow was going to be better. He had no idea just how different it was actually going to be. The next evening, Jake couldn't sit still. He kept checking his phone every few minutes, making sure it was almost 7 o'clock. He'd spent his lunch break buying air freshener and shoving the worst of his mess into closets and under his bed. At least now there was a clear path through his apartment. He'd been imagining what kind of robot would show up. Maybe something like those round vacuum cleaners, but bigger and smarter. Or perhaps a tall machine with multiple arms that could dust and scrub at the same time. The website had made it sound so futuristic and advanced. At exactly 7 o'clock, Jake heard a soft knock on his door. Not the loud banging of a delivery guy, but a gentle, almost musical tap. He jumped up from his couch, smoothed down his wrinkled shirt, and walked to the door. Finally, he muttered to himself, reaching for the door handle. Time to see this amazing cleaning robot. He opened the door, expecting to see a delivery person with a big box, or maybe even the robot itself rolled up to his doorstep. Instead, he found himself staring at a young woman who looked nothing like what he'd expected. Jake's mouth fell open. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with the most unusual appearance he'd ever seen. Her hair was silver, not gray like an old person's, but actually silver like polished metal. It seemed to shimmer and move on its own, even though there was no wind in the hallway. Her eyes were the strangest part. They kept changing color, shifting from deep purple to bright blue, like looking at the ocean under different types of light. Her skin had a subtle glow to it, almost like she was wearing some kind of special makeup that caught the light perfectly. She wore what looked like a uniform made of liquid silver. It fit her perfectly and seemed to move like water whenever she shifted her weight. Jake had never seen fabric like that before, not even in science fiction movies. "Good evening," she said, and her voice was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was melodic, almost like she was singing instead of talking. Each word flowed into the next like a gentle stream. "You must be Jake. I am Zara, your assigned domestic specialist from Stellar Domestic Solutions." Jake stood there like a statue, his brain trying to process what he was seeing. This definitely wasn't a robot. This was a person. A very unusual person, but still a person. Had he misunderstood the website completely? I was expecting... Jake stammered, still holding the door halfway open. "May I enter to begin my assessment of your living space?" Zara asked politely, tilting her head slightly. The motion was graceful, like a dancer or someone who'd taken years of posture classes. Jake's mind raced. Maybe the company used people instead of robots, but called them something fancy for marketing reasons. Maybe this was some kind of high-tech cleaning service with specially trained staff. The uniform certainly looked expensive and professional. "Oh yes, of course. Come in," Jake said, stepping aside and immediately regretting that he hadn't cleaned more thoroughly. Zara walked into his apartment with smooth, flowing movements. She didn't just walk. She seemed to glide across the floor like she was floating, just slightly above it. Jake rubbed his eyes, wondering if he was seeing things correctly. She looked around his living space with intense curiosity, her color-changing eyes taking in every detail. She didn't seem disgusted by the mess, like Jake had expected. Instead, she appeared fascinated, as if she was studying everything with scientific interest. "Your dwelling is quite lived in," she said carefully, running her fingers along his dusty bookshelf. Where her hand touched, the dust simply disappeared, leaving the wood gleaming like it was brand new. Jake blinked hard, Had he really just seen that, or was he more tired than he thought? Yeah, I know it's pretty bad, Jake admitted, feeling embarrassed. I work a lot and don't have much time for cleaning. That's why I called your company. Zara nodded thoughtfully. I understand. Your species, people like you often struggle with maintaining domestic harmony while pursuing career objectives. Jake paused. That was an odd way to phrase it, but maybe English wasn't her first language. She certainly had an unusual accent he couldn't place. Where are you from originally? Jake asked, genuine curiosity overcoming his confusion. Zara's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment she looked nervous. Very far away, she said quickly. A place you probably haven't heard of. Shall we begin the cleaning process? Before Jake could ask any more questions, Zara began moving through his apartment with purpose. She started in the kitchen, and Jake followed at a distance, mesmerized by what he was seeing. She didn't use any cleaning supplies or tools. Instead, she would touch surfaces with her hands, and stains would simply vanish. Grease disappeared from his stovetop. Watermarks evaporated from his sink. The mysterious green substance growing in his coffee mug dissolved into nothing. How are you doing that? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara paused and looked at him with those shifting blue-purple eyes. Advanced techniques, she said simply. Very advanced. Jake watched in amazement as she moved to his living room. She touched his coffee table, and years of water rings and scratches disappeared. She ran her hand along his couch cushions, and they fluffed up like they were brand new. The smell of old pizza and neglect was replaced by something fresh and clean, like the air after a spring rain. This is incredible, Jake breathed. I've never seen anything like this. Zara smiled, and her whole face seemed to light up literally. Your satisfaction is important to us. We pride ourselves on providing services that exceed expectations. As Jake watched her work, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very different about this situation. The way she moved, the way she cleaned without tools, the way she spoke. None of it seemed quite normal. But his apartment was becoming cleaner than it had been in years, so he decided to just enjoy the show. What he didn't know was that his life was about to become far more interesting than he'd ever imagined. 3 hours later, Jake's apartment looked like something from a home design magazine. Every surface gleamed. The air smelled fresh and clean. His books were organized by color on shelves that looked brand new. Even his old carpet appeared to have been replaced, though he knew it was the same one he'd had for years. Zara stood in the center of his living room, her silver uniform still spotless despite all the work she'd done. She wasn't even breathing hard, which seemed impossible after cleaning an entire apartment so thoroughly. Your living space has been optimized for maximum comfort and efficiency, she announced with that musical voice of hers. All surfaces have been restored to their original condition, and I've reorganized your belongings according to usage patterns and aesthetic harmony. Jake walked around his apartment in amazement. His kitchen counters were visible for the first time in months. His bathroom sparkled like a fancy hotel. Even his bedroom looked like something from a furniture catalog, with his clothes neatly arranged and his bed made with corners so sharp they could cut paper. This is impossible, Jake said, running his hand along his coffee table. 3 hours ago, this thing was covered in scratches and stains. Now it looks brand new. How did you do this? Zara's confident expression faltered. She looked around nervously, as if checking to make sure they were alone. Her color-changing eyes shifted from blue to purple, to something that looked almost silver. I need to tell you something, she said quietly, her voice losing some of its musical quality. But you must promise not to panic or call anyone. Jake felt his heart rate speed up. Call anyone? Like who? The police? Please just sit down and listen, Zara said, gesturing to his newly pristine couch. What I'm about to tell you will sound crazy, but it's the truth. Jake sat down slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. Was she some kind of criminal? A spy? Someone using illegal chemicals to clean? His imagination ran wild with increasingly ridiculous scenarios. Zara paced back and forth in front of him, her movement still graceful, but now showing signs of nervousness. "The cleaning company isn't exactly what you think it is," she began. "And I'm not exactly what you think I am either." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, though part of him was starting to suspect the answer might be something he wasn't ready to hear. "Stellar Domestic Solutions is real, but it's not a normal Earth business," Zara said, then paused as if weighing her words carefully. "It's run by beings from another planet. My planet, actually." Jake stared at her. "Another planet," he repeated slowly. "Yes. I come from a world called Stellara, which is very far from here. So far that your scientists haven't even discovered it yet." Zara stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "I'm what you would call an alien." The words hung in the air between them. Jake's brain struggled to process what she'd just said. An alien. She was claiming to be an alien. From outer space. Who cleaned apartments? "You're joking," Jake said weakly. "I wish I were." Zara sat down across from him, her expression serious. "My people have been studying Earth for many years. We're fascinated by human culture, especially how you create homes. On our planet, we live in efficient structures designed only for survival. But humans make their living spaces warm and personal and meaningful." Jake looked around his newly cleaned apartment. Everything was perfect, but somehow it still felt like his space. His books were arranged beautifully but still accessible. His favorite chair was positioned perfectly for reading. Even his family photos were displayed in a way that made them look important and cherished. "That's why the company exists," Zara continued. "It's an exchange program. Young beings from my world volunteer to come to Earth and learn about human domestic life by working as cleaning specialists. We get to study your culture up close, and humans get incredibly thorough cleaning services." "But why the secrecy? Why not just tell people the truth?" Zara gave him a look that clearly said he should know the answer to that question. "How do you think most humans would react if they knew aliens were coming into their homes? There would be panic, government investigations, military involvement. Our program would be shut down immediately." Jake had to admit she had a point. If the news reported that aliens were working as house cleaners, the world would probably lose its mind. "So the advanced cleaning technology," Jake began, "is me," Zara finished. "My people have abilities that seem impossible to humans. We can break down dirt and stains at a molecular level just by touching them. We can restore damaged materials to their original condition. We can sense the optimal arrangement for objects based on energy patterns and usage frequency." Jake watched as Zara held up her hand. Her palm began to glow with a soft, warm light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. "This is how I cleaned your apartment. It's as natural to me as breathing is to you." "This is insane," Jake said, but he couldn't deny what he'd seen with his own eyes. "You're really from another planet." "I am, and I've been living on Earth for 6 months now, learning about human homes and families. I've cleaned hundreds of apartments and houses, but I've never told anyone the truth before." Zara's glow faded and she looked down at her hands. "I wasn't supposed to tell you either." "Then why did you?" Zara was quiet for a long moment. "Because you're different. Most humans I work for barely notice me. They leave me alone to clean and go about their business. But you watched everything I did with such curiosity and interest. You asked questions and seemed genuinely amazed by simple cleaning. You made me feel noticed." Jake felt a strange warmth in his chest. This incredible being from another world had chosen to trust him with her secret. "What happens now? Do you report back to your planet about human cleaning habits?" "Something like that," Zara said with a small smile. "But the truth is, I've learned much more than I expected. Your people don't just create homes. You create feelings of safety and belonging. You fill your spaces with memories and meaning. It's beautiful in a way my people have never experienced." Jake looked around his apartment again, seeing it through new eyes. It wasn't just clean now. It felt like a real home for the first time in years. "So what happens to us now?" he asked. Do you disappear back to your planet? Do I pretend this never happened? Zara's eyes shifted to a deep, thoughtful blue. I don't know, she admitted. This wasn't part of the plan. Instead of running away, screaming, or calling the police, Jake found himself doing something completely unexpected. He got up, walked to his kitchen, and started making tea. His hands moved automatically while his brain tried to catch up with everything he'd just learned. Do aliens drink tea? He called out from the kitchen, surprised by how normal his voice sounded. Zara appeared in the doorway looking curious. I've never tried it. My people don't consume liquids the way humans do. We absorb what we need directly from our atmosphere. Well, you're on Earth now, Jake said, pulling out 2 mugs. And on Earth, we deal with crazy situations by making hot drinks and talking about them. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other at Jake's small dining table. Zara held her mug carefully, fascinated by the warmth spreading through the ceramic. She took a small sip and her eyes widened in surprise. This is amazing, she said, taking another sip. It's warm and comforting in a way I've never experienced. Is this what humans call cozy? Jake smiled despite everything. Yeah, that's exactly what cozy means. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the strangeness of the situation. Finally, Jake spoke up. So tell me about your world. What's it like where you come from? Zara's expression grew thoughtful. Stellara is very different from Earth. Everything is designed for maximum efficiency. Our buildings are tall and silver, perfectly climate-controlled, with no wasted space. Every citizen has exactly what they need to survive and contribute to society. That sounds, practical, Jake said carefully. It is practical, but it's also cold. Zara ran her finger around the rim of her mug. We don't have what you call families living together. Children are raised in education centers. Adults live in individual units optimized for their work assignments. There's no such thing as personalizing your space or keeping objects for emotional reasons. Jake looked around his apartment, seeing his belongings with new appreciation. His bookshelf filled with stories he loved. Photos of family and friends, scattered on various surfaces. Even his collection of coffee mugs, each one picked up from different places he'd visited. That sounds lonely, he said honestly. I thought it was normal until I came here, Zara admitted. On my first assignment, I cleaned an elderly woman's house. She had photographs everywhere, hundreds of them. Pictures of children growing up, family gatherings, trips to beautiful places. She told me stories about each one. I realized she wasn't just keeping images, she was keeping memories. Zara's eyes began to glow softly as she spoke. In that moment, I understood something my people have never experienced. These objects weren't just taking up space. They were holding pieces of her heart. Jake felt a strange connection to this alien girl who was so far from home. Is that why you volunteered for this program? Partly. But also because I was curious about something my supervisors mentioned in their reports. They said humans have something called loneliness, and they try to fill it by surrounding themselves with meaningful objects and creating warm spaces. She looked directly at him. I wanted to understand what loneliness felt like. And do you understand it, I mean? Zara nodded slowly. I think I've been lonely my entire life without knowing there was a word for it. On Stellara, we're surrounded by others, but we don't really connect. We work together efficiently, but we don't share stories or dreams or fears. Jake found himself opening up in a way he hadn't with anyone in years. I know exactly what you mean. I've been surrounded by people at work, but I've never felt more alone. I throw myself into projects and deadlines, but at the end of the day, I come home to an empty apartment and realize I don't have anyone to share my day with. Is that why your living space was so chaotic? Zara asked gently. Jake laughed, but there was sadness in it. I guess when you don't expect anyone to visit, you stop caring what things look like. I stopped making my apartment a home and just let it become a place where I collapsed after work. They talked until well past midnight. Zara told him about her planet's advanced technology, their peaceful society, and their complete lack of art, music, or anything created purely for beauty. Jake shared his struggles with work pressure, his difficulty maintaining friendships, and his dream of maybe starting his own software company someday. On Stellara, everyone has their role assigned based on their abilities, Zara explained. There's no choice, no risk, no possibility of failure, but also no possibility of creating something uniquely your own. That sounds safe but limiting, Jake said. Very limiting. When I learned about human entrepreneurs who risk everything to build their own businesses, I was fascinated. The idea that someone could have a dream and work to make it real, even if they might fail, seemed incredibly brave. Jake felt a warmth spread through his chest. I've never thought of my business dreams as brave. Mostly I think of them as scary. Fear and bravery often exist together, Zara said wisely. I've learned that from studying humans. You do things that frighten you because you believe they're worth doing. As the night went on, Jake found himself laughing more than he had in months. Zara's perspective on everyday human things was both innocent and insightful. She was amazed by his houseplants, fascinated by his collection of books, and completely enchanted by his old guitar that he'd stopped playing years ago. "You create music?" she asked, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "I used to." "Not very well, but I enjoyed it." Jake picked up the guitar and strummed a few chords. The sound filled his clean apartment with warmth. Zara closed her eyes and listened with complete attention. "We have sounds on Stellara, but nothing like this. Nothing that exists just to create beauty and emotion." Jake played a simple song, feeling self-conscious but also strangely happy. When he finished, Zara opened her eyes and they were shimmering with something that looked like tears. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said softly. As Jake looked at this extraordinary being who had appeared at his door, he realized his life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. And somehow, he'd helped an alien from another world understand what it meant to feel at home. Neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring challenges that would test everything they'd discovered about friendship, belonging, and the courage to choose your. 3 weeks had passed since that first night when Zara revealed her secret. Jake's life had completely transformed, but not just because his apartment stayed perfectly clean. For the first time in years, he looked forward to coming home from work. Every evening, Zara would be there waiting with stories about her day exploring the city while he worked. She'd discovered coffee shops and libraries, watched street musicians, and observed families in parks. Each new experience fascinated her, and hearing about them through her eyes made Jake see his own world differently. Their routine had become comfortable and natural. Zara would maintain his apartment with her incredible abilities while Jake worked, but when he got home, they'd cook dinner together. Well, Jake would cook while Zara watched in amazement, asking endless questions about why humans enjoyed the process of preparing food when it would be more efficient to just consume nutrition directly. "Because the smell of onions cooking reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen," Jake had explained one evening. "And because taking time to create something, even something simple like pasta sauce, makes the eating more meaningful." Zara had nodded thoughtfully, absorbing this lesson about how humans connected memories and emotions to everyday activities. But this particular evening felt different from the moment Jake walked through his door. Zara was sitting on his couch, but instead of her usual bright smile, her face was streaked with tears that glowed faintly in the dim light. Her silver uniform seemed duller than usual, and her color-changing eyes were stuck on a deep, sad purple. "Zara? What's wrong?" Jake dropped his work bag and rushed to her side. She looked up at him with an expression of pure heartbreak. "They know," she whispered. "Who knows?" "Know what?" "My supervisors on Stellara. They've been monitoring all of us in the exchange program through hidden devices in our uniforms." Zara's voice cracked. "They know I told you the truth about who I am. They know I've been bonding with you instead of just observing." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean?" "It means I've violated the terms of my assignment. I was supposed to study human domestic habits and file reports, nothing more. I wasn't supposed to form personal attachments or reveal our existence to anyone." More glowing tears rolled down her cheeks. "They're sending a retrieval ship tomorrow night." "A retrieval ship?" To take me back to Stellara. Immediately. Zara stood up and began pacing, her movements no longer graceful but jerky with anxiety. I'll be questioned about my breach of protocol, then reassigned to a research facility where I'll spend the rest of my life filing reports about Earth culture from memory. I'll never be allowed to return here or participate in any off-world programs again. Jake felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. The thought of Zara disappearing from his life, of going back to his old lonely existence, was unbearable. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd become more than just a friend. She'd become the person he most wanted to talk to share experiences with, to see smile when he came home each day. There has to be something we can do, Jake said desperately. Can't you explain to them that you were just trying to do your job better, that understanding humans on a personal level helps with your research? Zara shook her head sadly. The decision has already been made. The ship will arrive tomorrow at sunset, and I have to be ready to leave. No arguments, no delays, no exceptions. They sat in silence for several minutes, both trying to process what this meant. Finally, Jake spoke up. What if you didn't go? Zara looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? What if you just stayed here? With me? Jake, that's impossible. If I don't report to the retrieval ship, I'll be considered a defector. I can never return to Stellara. I'd be completely cut off from my people, my world, everything I've ever known. Her voice was barely above a whisper. And I know so little about actually living as a human. I've only been observing from the outside. Jake moved closer to her on the couch. Then we'll figure it out together. You've taught me so much about seeing beauty in everyday things, about not being afraid to connect with people. Maybe I can teach you about being human. But what kind of life could I have here? I don't have human identification documents. I don't officially exist in your world. How would I work or find a place to live or... Zara's practical concern spilled out in a rush. We'll solve those problems one at a time, Jake said firmly. I've been thinking about starting my own software company anyway. You could help me. Your perspective on efficiency and organization could be incredible for business consulting. And as for a place to live, he gestured around his apartment. This place has never felt more like home than it has these past 3 weeks. Zara's eyes began to shift from purple to a hopeful blue. You would really want me to stay? Even knowing it means we'd both be starting something completely unknown? The past 3 weeks have been the best of my life, Jake said honestly. Before you arrived, I was just existing, working, sleeping, eating takeout, and wondering if this was all there was. But you've shown me what it feels like to have someone to come home to, someone who's genuinely happy to see me, someone who makes ordinary moments feel special. You've done the same for me, Zara said softly. On Stellara, I had a function, but not a purpose. Here I feel like I matter to someone. I feel like I'm choosing my own path instead of just following programming. The next evening, they stood together on Jake's balcony, watching the sky as the sun began to set. In the distance, a strange silver object moved silently through the clouds, too smooth and fast to be any Earth aircraft. That's them, Zara said, her hand finding Jake's. Are you scared? Jake asked. Terrified, she admitted. But also excited. For the first time in my life, I'm making a choice based on what I want, not what's expected of me. As the alien ship hovered over the city for several minutes searching for its missing passenger, Jake and Zara remained hidden on the balcony. Finally, the ship moved on, disappearing into the evening sky. Well, Jake said, squeezing Zara's glowing hand. I guess we're officially roommates now. Zara laughed, the sound musical and full of joy. I have so much to learn about being human. Lucky for you, I'm a pretty good teacher when it comes to figuring things out as you go along, Jake said with a grin. As they watched the stars appear in the darkening sky, both Jake and Zara knew they were beginning an adventure unlike anything either of their worlds had ever imagined. They had chosen each other over the safety of their old lives, and together they would discover what it truly meant to create a home where two hearts could belong.